Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Esoteric and a continuing series, The History of the Dead, where we review every single House of the Dead entry in a retrospective fashion, talking about the development of the games, their history, and tying the story of the entire franchise together. And obviously last week we had House of the Dead 4, so we need to move right into House of the Dead 4 Special, because it is the continuation of the story from that game. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe, that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. Now, as a game, the House of the Dead 4 Special is nothing, pun intended, special. If you played this on the PlayStation 3, if you played this on your computer, you are missing 90% of what made the House of the Dead 4 Special, pun intended again, special. But I have played this game twice in my life, both times in Chicago years ago when an arcade in the suburbs had a House of the Dead 4 Special cabinet on the floor. This thing was massive. It was an amusement ride that had a light gun game built into it with rotating chairs and so many other things. And you'll see here I am playing on TechnoParrot today so I can show you the screen transitions as to when that cabinet would have turned. But G is here after the events of House of the Dead 4, and Kate is continuing on after the death of her partner, which we'll show you guys in a bit because at this point in time it is not a spoiler if you're following along with the series. This is just such an interesting entry in the House of the Dead franchise because it isn't so much a game. Of course we're playing a game, we're shooting zombies, but the real hook of this was just that gigantic cabinet. And there is only apparently one left in North America in Florida, and there's a couple overseas, but this has almost become an extinct game. But you'll see here James jumping into the final boss of House of the Dead 4 and exploding with him, leaving Kate to go on about her own way. And this game basically takes place immediately after the ending of House of the Dead 4, so you can basically consider it one whole game if you play them back to back on PlayStation 3. Just consider it one piece. But again, just like in our House of the Dead 4 review, this is a spectacular game with awesome graphics, a great soundtrack, and just a fun gameplay hook. But again, if you could just see that cabinet, you would 100% understand why this game existed. And if you are close to a cabinet, leave me a comment down below because I would be curious, because user reports of where these things are still sporadic. Apparently there's one in Hong Kong, one in Macau, one in the Middle East, and one somewhere in Japan, but people aren't even sure if it's still there or not anymore. And I would just really be curious to see where these are. What is interesting, you would think at the end of a House of the Dead game, all the zombies would just be gone, but no, they are still here. Just because you killed the final boss doesn't mean anything really has happened. We are still continuing along this story, and of course Kate's story will pivot and change throughout the series as well, because she is going to show up again. But it wouldn't be a House of the Dead game after one if there wasn't a car to drive, and House of the Dead 4 Special is no different. We're going to get that vehicular sequence as well, and we've already talked about how important those are in the previous videos. So if you haven't watched these in order, I highly recommend you go back and do watch them in order. That way you can better understand how the entire story fits together. But House of the Dead 4 is an awesome game. It does scale back on the violence of the previous entries. You're no longer getting dismemberment of limbs, blowing off heads, and shooting holes through the zombies. You just have a little bit of skin damage. They kind of just rip apart a bit. And I do still think that is a big miss. I miss the violence of the original games. If you're going to be shooting zombies in House of the Dead, I expect limbs to blow off. And I will say this truck here, 9 out of 10 times, I fail that completely. Now, the nice thing with TechnoParrot is you do have a situation where you can have infinite life, because when you played this in arcades, once your life was over, you died. There was no continue. This was not something that you just put $1 into experience. I think I paid $10 for myself and $10 for my wife to play together as a two-player experience, and I was 100% happy to hand over that $20 bill because I knew I'd probably never see the cabinet again, and I drove back out maybe a month later to play it one more time, and I never saw it there again, unfortunately. I will say House of the Dead 4 Special definitely retreads some territory, including boss fights. There's a lot of reusing of assets to get this game off the ground, but that makes total sense. The expense of developing this cabinet must have been massive for Sega. It was probably somewhere up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not even kidding. I don't have a number on it, but shipping that thing alone from Japan probably would have been $10,000, and I do have some experience shipping large items overseas from previous work. But I will say, it's a House of the Dead game, it's got an awesome soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds, and I'll be right back.
What's down this way?
We don't have much time. We have to stop him.
Intruder alert. Intruder alert. Security level 4 activated. Security level 4 activated.
Give it a rest.
What is this place? What are they making here?
Let go of me! A dead end.
Now, this environment has nothing to do as far as the geography of House of the Dead 3 is concerned, but visually they are near identical, both in what's going on as well as the hallway layout. Now, House of the Dead 3 takes place in a nondescript state in the United States, where House of the Dead 4 takes place in Europe. You'll see here we hop on this elevator after going down that hall filled with tubes, and if we move back to House of the Dead 4 Special, we're going to find an elevator going up after a hallway with tubes. It seems just like a little visual and thematic tie back to House of the Dead 3, but of course we're on different continents, so they can't be the same facility. Then again, the entire storyline and canon of House of the Dead is quite confusing, so maybe even the developers at Sega struggled a little bit understanding where they were. And that is the hard part about putting together a series like this. There is so much lore, there is so much backtracking, there are so many different characters you need to keep track of, and the games do not release in sequential order as far as the timeline is concerned. House of the Dead 3, if you've already watched the video, is the end of the story. House of the Dead 4 takes place before that, so it really is hard to jump around. But again, this game just does absolutely spectacular with the gameplay and shooting, and I do love this area here where you have these pools of what looks like blood. It's never described as such, but it is red and it definitely has that viscous quality that blood would have. And as all these zombies pop out of the water, I would say that in some ways, House of the Dead 4 Special has better individual gameplay segments than House of the Dead 4 proper. But as we go up this elevator here, we're going to see a very familiar face, and don't worry about the slight techno-parrot issues, those will go away in a second. But our friend the Magician is back, and I always love a Magician revisit. It's such an iconic moment in House of the Dead lore. And I will say the boss fight is the easiest in the series. I feel like maybe Sega was really nice. If you spent the money to play this game, and you got all the way to the end with one life bar not dying, then they gave you the opportunity to go ahead and get a really easy boss fight so you could see the ending. But you'll see here, there's not a lot of story involved in the actual game. This is just a continuation of House of the Dead 4, but if you get the hidden ending, you do get to tie this game into a lot of other things going on. We will skip forward because you've already seen enough Magician fights through this series so far, but he is dead, and he brings up this box, and he's going to call it Pandora's Box. That might sound familiar already. Maybe you'll find out more about it next week. You'll have to wait and see, and you'll have to know. Now, I am going to let this go bad. You're supposed to throw a grenade, but I want you guys to see the worst ending first, so I can bring you through the good ending and then the secret ending from there. But all of a sudden, Magician is replicating, and now we know why there's so many in the House of the Dead universe. Apparently, Magician is not a one, it is a multiple, and apparently it can clone itself, so we could be having Magician fights so long as there is a House of the Dead franchise to play. But you're going to see here, that box is going to explode, and we're going to have a very bad day. Now, if we move on to the PlayStation 3 version, and the good ending on this as well, you're going to see that Magician explodes, and apparently those clones just do not come up. That does not mean that they don't still exist, and they'll probably revisit us in a future game, but we were able to succeed, get the good ending, and all you really need to do is throw the grenade with a good aim, and you'll be perfectly fine. And G's going to say that they don't want to keep everyone waiting, and the fight's about to begin. And obviously, considering this isn't the final game story-wise in the House of the Dead series, you know that is true. But if we go to the best ending that you need to unlock with certain scoring conditions, a man is going to limp in and talk about Pandora's Box and the Wheel of Fate. And those are definitely things that you would know. But to the point in this series, the man with the limp has not yet been given a name. You'll see him limp off here. And if we move back to House of the Dead 3, you're going to see the same man with the same limp come in for the same secret or best ending. And that's going to be very important when we come into the next episode in this series, House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn, because there's a man and he has a limp, and maybe I've already told you who it is. Maybe you haven't been paying attention. Short of that, House of the Dead 4 Special, if you see a cabinet, play it. Bye-bye.